Ladies, gentlemen, DC people out there, welcome to a DCU Chapter 1 Gods and Monsters discussion series video. If you saw on my community tab on my YouTube channel, I put a post out there considering the way the Flash movie has performed at the box office so far, even though it's got some weeks left. I don't think it's going to exactly recover. We'll touch on some of that. I thought, okay, let's talk about the future of DC. Let's talk about the remaining DC movies. Let's talk about Gunn's DCU, and just get you guys to pick my brain about it, and we can also just bounce off each other in today's comment section. So I always love doing these. I always like speculating about the future because it most certainly is an interesting one with DC, with what they've got coming up. I mean, we've got a new Superman now with David Corenswet, a new Lois Lane with Rachel Brosnahan, but will the future DCU fix what seems to be missing from what we're dealing with right now, and possibly with the remaining DC movie releases? So, first up on this screenshot here, 51 upvotes, Rojo Broke 5979 says, James Gunn and Peter's DCU hasn't really started yet. It really starts in 2025. Let's let them see what works and doesn't in other movies and make Superman incredible for us and hopefully profitable for other DCU movies. And I included the comment because it's true from CN Gotham 4111. Technically, it started with Blue Beetle, but James Gunn's vision starts in 2025. Yes, technically, the DCU in prelude mode starts with Blue Beetle, but as Rojo kind of says it's not really starting then. It's a weird thing. What I guess I mean to say is that it's not reflective of what is being produced as a DCU project well and truly, because, you know, with Superman Legacy in that movie, there's going to be all this kind of exposition on top of a Superman story, of course. There's going to be other things out there, like we've heard about the Authority being brought in. There's probably going to be other world building that kind of sets up, okay, so this is the new aesthetic and the new look for this living, breathing, cohesive DC universe that's going to establish itself to being different from the old DCEU. So even while it does start with Blue Beetle, that movie was made a while ago. He is a canon character in the DCU, but I still, as per what James Gunn is basically saying as well, would look at Superman Legacy as the proper start. But yeah, Creature Commandos as well, the Waller series, those are all within the DCU. And I think they've already done what you're suggesting here. Let's let them see what works and doesn't in other movies and make Superman incredible. So, yeah, I mean, I guess you could say, is there a lesson to be taken out of Flash, or is Flash's failure due to, like, other things? Because, again, it seemed to be getting a lot of positive praise, but that still didn't get people to go see it. I don't think the DCU future movies can really afford to, like, experiment too much. They kind of need to slap from the get-go, because right now the landscape from fans' perspectives, it's quite a frail one, especially going into the DCU, that if there's a miss early on, God forbid that being Superman Legacy, it will already sour the taste in people's mouths if they had any taste left for what is coming up with the DCU. And there will be a taste, don't get me wrong. No matter how many people are saying, oh, screw this, screw that, screw the DCU, there will be something there. And if they get a great flavor in there, weird analogies going on right now, but if, for example, to put it on the bottom line, Superman Legacy slaps, that might make a lot of the naysayers be like, oh, damn, I'm still holding on to my points I made before, but oh, damn. But if it doesn't slap, then yeah, like there'll be basically no taste left. Or what could have been a taste for the new DCU, even for some of the most cynical people, would have just defaulted back to a bitter taste in the mouth. And that's a bitter taste that's already been harboring for quite a while, because a lot of people are still, you know, very salty about certain things that have even led up to this new DCU in the first place, and those are fairly self-explanatory. So up next we have James Orion 8316 saying, one of the main elements I thought was missing from the DCEU was the massive cast of characters DC has to offer, and the huge shifts in tone each character brings to the table. Do you think they will have these tone shifts in the DCU, for example, having Batman and Superman, and do you think they will not only create the Justice League, but explore other teams like Justice League International and the Justice Society? So 100% with the tonal thing. I mean, I can't prove it for a fact. I can only go off what James Gunn has said before. Now, if you've heard this before, fair enough, but I still think a lot of people out there don't know every last little scoopy detail that he said. So he's actually very specifically answered this about, future movies and the tonal differences between them. And I really like this answer because it is a very true thing to talk about when you kind of look back at the different comic books in the source material. They were tonally different. So Gunn says, even though this is a connected universe, it's really important to me that the individual writers and directors on the projects give their own self-expression to it, just like they do in the comics. Everything doesn't always look the same. Everything doesn't always have the same expression. Different artists bring remarkably different looks, feels, and tones. This is not the Gunverse. So already there, I know we've been over that before, but just to kind of instill it again, with regards to your question here, apparently there is going to be unique takes and tones per the unique characters. And I've said this before as well with regards to, obviously, this would mean that a Superman movie wouldn't have the same tone necessarily as a Batman movie. Or to make a more extreme example, Swamp Thing wouldn't have the same tone as Lanterns or Booster Gold. And when I reflect over what Gunn has said before, even in that first screenshot I showed when he says this isn't the Gunverse, I think this is making a lot of people happy. But believe it or not, the reason why I bring it up in today's video again is because clearly so many people still don't quite realize it. I sometimes get asked these similar questions, and hearing that it's not the Gunverse, granted, we do need to see proof of this. Some people may be very skeptical and be like, oh, you shouldn't take his, believe it when you see it. And I do agree with that, but at least on paper, everything he's saying right now sounds good. It sounds like the cinematic universe of DC being cohesive, being unique as per what character, a living, breathing one, and also it not being a Gunverse, I think, catering to the question of, is everything going to feel like a Guardians comedic kind of movie, or is a Peacemaker kind of thing? Apparently not. So James, Ryan, when you say, the tonal shifts each character brings to the table, I think that's going to be really spot on. But I think some people might, out of hearing this, think, well, how are they going to work together? Well, believe it or not, they do. But no matter what, you shouldn't compromise the tonal shift between each project, because fully investing in that tone, even if it makes the feel of each project feel a bit different or quite different in some characters' cases in the DCU, serving and going full send on that as per what fits that character is what will serve that character best. And I think what will serve the movie and the product best, rather than trying to make everything feel so the same movie to movie to movie to movie, of what Gunn is kind of trying to say there about some periods of the MCU. And do I think they will not only create the Justice League, but explore other teams like Justice League International and the Justice Society? That one is really hard to kind of nail down, I would say, because I've got my thoughts about the Justice League that I have mentioned before, and how I don't know if there is like a proper league established right now, but I wouldn't be surprised if maybe the Trinity know of each other. But as we go throughout Chapter 1, the projects that we do know about and the projects that are still yet to be announced, because only less than half have been just for Chapter 1, they might go on to recruit and build that foundation instead of kind of, jumping into it like what we've had before to accelerate a team ensemble movie. So as for like Justice Society, I think it would be super awesome to have Easter eggs in there. I don't know if there would have been a JSA in the past. That would be super dope. I don't know if James Gunn would even do a film set in a different time period, because that would be really cool. Or would they kind of do what Black Adam did eventually maybe, and do a modern day version of the JSA, where maybe it's been active since decades and decades past, but hey, here's the recent lineup. Here's Hawkman reincarnated for the something time, right? That would be cool, but I don't know if they're going to concentrate on that so far, but maybe we'll get that in Easter eggs at the very least through world building. Maybe as we explore the universe and get these other characters in Superman Legacy, because that's something people are a bit concerned about right now. We're hearing that the Authority is going to be in it. James Gunn has teased Mr. Terrific so many times, and he could be in it. Maybe there's other characters out there that we'll meet who have been Legacy JSA members who have conversations with Superman or Batman in other movies. And it, again, just leads to this larger exposition, because this is a new kind of continuity and universe that we're exploring right now compared to the previous DCEU. So man, there's so many possibilities. So Mikkel938 says, I think a lot of people are afraid that audiences will not be giving the DCU reset a proper chance. Are we in danger of having the new DCU be canned or overlooked at release. And I included this comment with RCB Mind saying, there's already a lot of buzz for the newly announced Superman/Clark Kent and Lois Lane castings, not just in our DC fans or general comic book/geek sphere, but the public too. The film and DC reboot won't come until 2025, a year and a half after Aquaman 2. There will be plenty of time to give the public a rest and hype up the new universe. It all depends now on Legacy being great. And I included that because I feel like RCB kind of did summarize it quite decently there. I mean, I think I've got to get into a bit more. But first and foremost, I do think people 100% are afraid that people or other fans won't even give it a chance. And I think this extends onto movies coming out very soon, such as Blue Beetle. Like, Blue Beetle could actually be a kind of decent movie. Like, we don't know. Some people seem to think it kind of looks way too typical family, formulaic setup there, like Shazam or something. So maybe people just aren't interested in it that way. But we don't know yet. But it might get caught up in the sweep of this disinterest of the remaining DCEU movies, even though he's a canonical DCU character. I think that's something the general audience just don't know about. So they look at maybe Blue Beetle and roll their eyes once again. So I understand how that extends on to the future DCU, because you have all these recent box office flops, whether that's Black Adam to this, to that, now The Flash, and what about Aquaman 2 and Blue Beetle? Well, if they're not successful, it kind of leads to this larger narrative about, will people even turn up to the DCU? Now, what I will say is I agree with RCB here in how the Superman Clark Kent thing, the Lois Lane castings, David Corenswet, Rachel Brosnahan, yes, so happy about that. If you guys saw my video the other day, you'll know that I've been wanting these guys since day one, ever since we heard those in the runnings for the roles. So I do think a lot of people are excited about it. And the main thing I'm trying to get to here is the one thing, despite all of whatever anyone wants to say about the pressure of the future DCU, the disinterest, the box office flops, how this could affect the first DCU movies, what will that mean? Will they scrap it? This, that, and the other. The one thing it has going for it is that the first movie is a Superman movie. Now, before anyone says, but it's not Henry Cavill, so I don't care about it, or whatever. No matter what, the one thing it has going for it is that the first movie of the DCU is a new Superman. And Superman is a big name. And yes, I still believe that will demand or even give us this silver lining of interest peaked, even amongst those who are up there in the skeptical crowd. Because even if you have negative feelings, you want the Snyderverse restored, you want it sold to Netflix, you want Henry Cavill to come back, I don't know. Or you're just like, rolling your eyes at a new DC Universe. Superman's just such a big character. This is the first movie in a new universe. We haven't had a Superman solo movie in so many years, but now this is kind of a soft reboot, if you will, a new Superman, a new actor, which, again, like, don't get me wrong, I'm seeing a fair share of negativity about it, but for the most part, that camp comes from the you-know-who crowd. Like, let's face it. Like, don't get me wrong. There's other people who are like, I really wanted Nicholas Hoult. Fair enough. But they're not body-shaming. They're not doing all of this bullying stuff to the actors, of which is already happening every time, for crying out loud. Like, we've already been through this before when Robert Pattinson was cast as Bruce Wayne and Batman. The same thing, comparing to Ben Affleck. We need Ben Affleck back. We want the Batfleck movie. Same thing now with David Corenswet. But what I'm trying to highlight there is that's still a vocal minority. I'm seeing plenty of mutuals or other people just absolutely really pumped for this. There is reservation. There is apprehension. I actually invite that. Of course, we don't know how James Gunn is going to do with this movie, but the very intrigue surrounding this, going back to the keywords of silver lining, this new DCU kicks off with a Superman movie. And I think people will be interested in it. But the pressure ultimately remains. As RCB says, it all depends now on Legacy being great. So I think it will make quite a bit of money at the box office. Granted, though, I'm not naive enough to say if it got terrible reviews in early special screenings, then that would have an impact for sure. But there is quite a bit of a break. There really is between Aquaman 2 and Superman Legacy. Granted, it might not be the break of what some people think DC needs to kind of recoup its image a little bit. Some people are saying maybe like a 5-year break. And of course, when you're absent for the most part of cinematic movies for 5 years, people will be craving any kind of reboot. But Aquaman 2 at the end of this year till Superman Legacy 2025, is that enough of a break? Maybe not. but it's still a break nonetheless. Granted, you are going to get Creature Commandos and Waller and Penguin and stuff like that, but we're talking like cinematic universe level stuff. So in conclusion, it has got a bit of a break. People will be speculating this whole time, wondering what the new DCU is going to be like. Don't get me wrong, those who are salty about the past will probably forever be salty about it. That's never going to go away. But I do 100% believe that people will be intrigued about this new Superman. So thank goodness this new universe has that going for it. If it was starting off on the Authority, this would be a whole different conversation. A whole different conversation. That's not me saying that the Authority won't be good, but from a branding and business perspective and marketing, people won't be invested in going to see that as the first DCU movie. But if Superman Legacy absolutely slaps, and the characters of the Authority being backdoor piloted, if you will, in Superman Legacy for their own movie are popular, then yeah, even though I do think some people will still be like, oh yeah, but the Authority shouldn't be coming so soon after Superman Legacy, people will still be more interested in seeing the Authority movie if Superman Legacy slaps. But if the Authority came out first, then yeah, that would be terrible. It really would. And up next from Brutal Vengeance here, kind of carrying on the conversation a little bit, do you think that most people are just wanting the DCU to officially begin? Or do you think people are just getting tired of the same comic book stories getting told over and over again? In my opinion, I think people are wanting the DCU to start so they can start over and make better stories with Gunn under the mantle. Thank you, man. Well, thank you for the question. And I think so. Again, I think the climate and just the landscape of DC is interesting because there are big camps and there are some smaller camps that I think make a lot of noise. But I think because there's so many people all over the place with such a mix of opinion, some people having one firm belief, some other people having a very big firm belief on the opposite side, some people in the middle kind of sharing both. It just kind of makes the brand of DC and DC movies right now borderline this milk that's over the best before date. Not quite expired, even though some people might want to argue that. And this is a weird analogy, I know, but truly, there's this disinterest in it. It's like, do I have the milk out of the fridge? Even though I could drink it, it's not quite off yet. I might just leave it. That's how I feel things are at. And don't get me wrong, some people are viewing this milk as completely expired. And again, that's that very big camp from the past. And fair enough if they want to believe the things they believe and don't want to carry on with the future of the DCU. But then again, there is a huge camp, an absolutely huge camp, and I'm in this boat as well. I have my frustrations of the past. I would have loved Cavill to continue. I have all of these opinions as well. Maybe not the exact same as maybe you watching right now, but I feel like I've got to the point of where a lot of people have as well. It's like, well, I just kind of am looking forward to the future. I'm not completely in Gunn's boat, completely non-biased. He's going to do incredible no matter what. I don't have proof of that. I would be so stupid to say that, and that would be shilling. There's no argument against that, right? But I'm optimistic. I want the new Superman. I love the casting. I like what I'm hearing from what James Gunn has said about his organization and his outlook, his methodical approach to this new DC universe. So yes, I think that a lot of people are just waiting for the DCU to start, but I do believe that the perceived superhero fatigue is affecting people as well. Even though I agree with Gunn, I don't necessarily think superhero fatigue is a real thing. It's more being mistaken for repetition in filmmaking and spectacle movies kind of doing the same thing repetitively again and again. It's not necessarily, I think, again, what most people perceive it as is like, oh no, it's just superhero things in general. Like straight, no, because if that was true, when you have the movies that don't take the repetitive approach, who really crafts something fresh, new. There's so much character-driven plot there. There's emotion and exploration. Those movies doing really well. Do you know what I mean? So the idea of superhero fatigue is something I think a general person believes in, but if you think about it for a minute, Gunn's comments about how it's repetition and it's actually not unique to superhero movies, but also just blockbuster spectacle movies in general, that is a thing. And yeah, technically true. Some people might be tired of those same comic book stories getting told over and over again, but hopefully the new DCU tries to avoid that. I hope so. And I will say, to be fair, like, even though I agree with what a lot of Gunn has said, and he is saying all the right things as a storyteller, as somebody who is methodically building out this new DC universe, he has said some things which I'm just like, I don't know, Chief, kind of thing, because he talks about these third acts that have got lazy with recent superhero or spectacle movies in general, even outside the superhero realm. Yet the Flash movie, he called the greatest superhero movie of all time. And all while I enjoyed the movie, but I have got a lot of issues with it, it's like, Gunn, I know you don't believe that. For example, the third act of the Flash movie, feel free to disagree with me here, but as much as I enjoy out of that movie, most people, even those who really enjoy it, agree that that third act, of which James Gunn was kind of critiquing a lot of superhero movies for, was arguably the weakest part of the film. You know, you just get to that third act, it gets a bit rushed. That's when the battlefield stuff comes. That's where a lot of the weakest CGI is. Not even Chronoball related, by the way. Even outside of that, the villain comes in, arguably a bit rushed there. Cool concept. So it's kind of representing what Gunn was saying, yet he calls it the greatest superhero movie of all time. So maybe he just said it because he's at the top and he wanted the movie to do well, which is kind of a unique position, because no matter what, I'm not trying to defend Gunn calling The Flash the greatest superhero movie of all time, but when you're in his position, you're not going to go on a podcast and say the opposite. So it is a bit weird. If I was him, I probably just wouldn't have said anything at all. So, of course, like, James Gunn isn't without us critiquing what he said in cases like this. But overall, I do think there will always be this contention going into the new DCU with various sides of the fandom, you know, those who really long for the old days and refuse to go into this new phase. The contention of discourse with regards to DCU direction and what Gunn has said, and maybe some people not agreeing with that. We won't know until it starts. I'm in the crowd of just wanting it to start. I like a lot of what I'm hearing, but it's just such a fascinating environment, because as such a big DC fan, you know, things, no matter what, aren't smooth sailing, even for those who are the most positive with regards to an outlook on the future and who are celebrating that David Corenswet have been cast and Rachel Brosnahan. It's still like, but we don't know. Is it gonna be good? Like, we really hope so. And if it isn't, then what the hell does that mean for DC, Warner Brothers Discovery, and everything else that falls under that umbrella? So up next from the real T-Bear OG saying, I just want to see certain characters on the big screen like Green Arrow, Mr. Terrific, Zatanna, even Phantom Stranger, etc. It's time to show casual fans and people who aren't fans of some of these other characters that they matter to. Also, I can't wait for Lantern's adaptation. With the latter there, me too. I think people aren't thinking about the Lantern show enough, and I love the idea of it. I hope it gets brought to fruition well. But I agree. I've talked about Green Arrow enough. That is a given for me. I have optimism there with him being implemented at some point, because I know that James Gunn is a huge fan of the character, so maybe he will make that happen with some of the unannounced projects of Chapter 1, or maybe Green Arrow will be saved for Chapter 2. We really don't know, so that could be many years away. But I 100% agree. Like, Mr. Terrific is another thing that he's teased heavily, possibly Loki being backdoor piloted into Superman Legacy. But when we hear more things like that, people start saying, how many characters are going to be in Superman Legacy? Zatanna or even Phantom Stranger, I really agree with that. I think characters like that are going to be, if this DC Universe is successful and doesn't get halted several years into its reign, only assuming, obviously, that would only happen if it did terribly, then I do think James Gunn will bring out some of these other characters as the world grows. Like Phantom Stranger, I think, had his first live-action debut in Swamp Thing, and that was so cool. I'm talking about DCU Swamp Thing here. So I die thinking about a cohesive DC universe in all the ways that James Gunn explains it, one that is so successful, where you get such a fresh breath of life delivered into all of these other characters. That's why I'm so happy, by the way, that Neil Gaiman's Sandman came to Netflix. Not that it's unpopular, but despite how popular Sandman was in the past, or even is now, a lot of people don't know about these other characters, or even from Constantine stories, or Swamp Thing, or Phantom Stranger, and just so many others. So I really hope that we can get to Swamp Thing 2027 or so, and DC is doing very well by then, and then that story brings life to Justice League Dark characters, and we just go more into the supernatural side. That would be a dream come true. But unfortunately, we might not have that for a while. just because from a business perspective, you launch with some of your strongest stuff. So again, the silver lining I speak of with Superman being the first movie. So William Huxley 3026 says, when do you think we can expect to hear about some more projects coming in Chapter 1 of the DCU, with the current slate lasting up to about 2027? I'm struggling to envision when we could hear some more about the future. I feel like the announcements could come at any time between now and the release of Superman Legacy, which is such a huge window. I agree. I think once upon a time, maybe not even that long ago, I was kind of talking about how, and we know some context with regards to what James Gunn is yet to announce. I've said it a billion times before now, but just to lay it on the table, we've had 10 projects announced, and Gunn has replied to fans saying that's less than half of what is to be announced just for Chapter 1, meaning that at least another 11 plus are yet to be announced for the remainder of Chapter 1, which means Chapter 2 would have 20 plus projects as well. And we know from Peter Safran that it would be 2 DC movie releases a year and 2 TV shows. And so a while back, I was thinking like, oh, maybe we'll hear about that sooner rather than later. But now with the optics of things, when I've heard a lot of people talking about how announcing the DCU before the Flash movie and everything like that, how this could have actually impacted a perspective of even going to see the Flash, even if in some minor way, could it have had some negative effect, launching and announcing Chapter 1 Gods and Monsters in the way that they did? Maybe. It's kind of hard to really get down to it unless a case study is done about it, because don't get me wrong, I think there was a lot of excitement for fans like myself seeing that YouTube video, Chapter 1 Gods and Monsters announcement, because there was a lot of discourse at the time. I understand why they did it in one way. James Gunn came in, only a few weeks before that, Henry Cavill was meant to be coming back as Superman in a movie early in development. He was in the credit scene of Black Adam, and then before you know it, all this stuff was happening. So I understand why they wanted to kind of get their new vision out there with 10 projects being announced, right? But there has been some impact, I think, as a result of that, for better or for worse. Some for better, like we knew about Superman Legacy. We now know who's cast for it. But do I think we're going to hear about the remaining 10 plus or 11 plus projects for Chapter 1 anytime soon? A while back, I would have said maybe yes, but now I don't think so. I mean, I'll hold my hands up if I'm wrong, but if I was to wager a guess here, I would say that I wouldn't expect to hear anything about these 11 plus projects until after Aquaman 2. Don't get me wrong, they want to advertise their new universe. This is big for them, and it needs to work out, as we've already been over, like especially with that first release of Superman Legacy. But with how things have been tanking so woefully bad, Flash movie being catastrophic, again, projected to maybe make 300 million, and when you take into account that the Flash's production to even make the movie was 220, and then with marketing included in that, it's around $330 million, it might not even make back on basic sales of the box office, the 330 that got put into it. And then you have to even take into account that even if it makes $300 million in the box office, most theaters around the world take anywhere from like 40 to 55% of those ticket sales. So anything in the box office, that's why the general rule of Hollywood is that you need to kind of double that or so, and then some, to be around 550 million to 600 plus million to break even and start making a profit. So a lot of people misinterpret that a lot of the times, and like, oh, the Flash cost with marketing $330 million. It just needs to make somewhere around there and then it's profitable. No. With the ticket sales and other costs in mind, it needs to make well north of 500 plus million and then some probably before it actually starts to see a profit. And I can tell you now, that is not going to happen. But the reason why I just went down that tangent there is because they don't want a repeat of this with Blue Beetle. They don't want a repeat of this with Aquaman 2. But if there's any chance of them doing better than how the Flash movie did, or just in terms of with respect to their own projections, they won't want to maybe detract from that if we're saying, hey, look, here's even more of our future DCU projects. We've already got 10 of them. Don't get me wrong. I would love to be a fly on the wall and know what those next 10 are. Does one of them continue off from Brave and the Bold? Maybe a Titans project with Nightwing? Is one of them Green Arrow? Like who knows? Who knows? But we've got 10 of them. To announce another 10 to complete Chapter 1, obviously we wouldn't hear anything about Chapter 2 projects. That could even get spoilery with one of the movie releases. We don't need it. If I'm being really grounded here with myself and putting my fanboy desires aside, I would love to hear them, but do I need to hear them before Aquaman 2? No. No, not really. So after Aquaman 2, when could I hear it? I actually don't know. Maybe the summer after Aquaman 2 we might hear more, but maybe only a few more. Maybe not the whole remainder of Chapter 1 projects, but maybe like 4 more projects. I imagine that in the year and a half after Aquaman 2 till Superman Legacy, James Gunn would give us some nuggets and teasers of some other projects in the future of DCU Chapter 1. It is, as you said yourself, such a huge window, and it's hard to guess because it could be any time after Aquaman 2. So up next here from Jurassic 1993 Park, with Zaslav throwing away millions of dollars with his incredibly poor executive decisions, I'm not sure Gunn and Safran's DCU will be able to reach its full potential. I think if nothing improves, there will unfortunately be cut corners and a greatly reduced budget with Superman Legacy. What I'm also wondering is whether they will want to go with the hard reboot path given the Flash's box office disappointment. Now, if the latter of that, I'm just going to address that straight away. I don't think they're going to or Gunn's going to pivot from his, kind of soft reboot into a hard reboot. I think he's maintaining Peacemaker characters. Again, Waller is a DCU project. Creature Commandos is a DCU project. We know that one of the characters from Creature Commandos, the animation, is appearing in live action in the Waller series. Peacemaker Season 2 is coming after Superman Legacy. We're well into the DCU by then, and obviously John Cena, Vigilante, all these characters will be playing their respective roles, and that's DCU. I really do not think whatsoever that they're going to pivot to a hard reboot. There's some characters that will remain from the DCEU. But with what you said in the former, will the DCU be able to reach its full potential if nothing improves? Maybe some cut corners and maybe a greatly reduced budget with Superman Legacy. Believe it or not, I don't think so. I know some people are starting to think that, but I don't think, even with the financial issues that Warner Brothers Discovery has, I don't think that will impact their attempt, at the beginning at least, with their new universe that they want to make extremely lucrative. Now, why is that? I do understand why people are apprehensive about this, because you look at how Warner Brothers Discovery are $49.5 billion in debt. And how much is the company worth overall, Warner Brothers Discovery? Around $29.5 billion. Now, don't get me wrong, other companies like Disney, Apple, Amazon, they have debts up to the 30s and 40 billions. But guess what? Those companies aren't worth $29.5 billion. They're worth hundreds, if not more, billions of dollars. So with respect and in perspective of their own worth, that debt doesn't seem so bad with how much those companies are worth. Whereas with Warner Brothers, it's how much are you worth? 29.5? Okay, that's not good. But the thing is, believe it or not, I don't think that will still impact what they're trying to put into it, because you can argue it's a risk, but the thing is, they, right now, as many of you know, they want to revitalize Harry Potter. They essentially want to get back to the early 2000s of Warner Brothers kind of glory days with how much money they were making back then. Harry Potter, the Lord of the Rings, all of this stuff, right? So with their future, they're still gonna invest money into Max, Harry Potter series. How popular that will be, I don't know. They're still gonna invest money in these new Lord of the Rings movies that we don't really know too much about. And as for the DCU, they're not gonna kind of half-ass, at least financially, the movies that are gonna kick it off. They don't want to half-ass it out the gate just in case it will look half-assed. Now, granted, you can still put a lot of money into things and it still looks half-assed. We don't really know how it's going to pan out, but no, I don't think they're going to cut corners and greatly reduce budget on their first impressionable movie into James Gunn and Peter Safran's DCU, because that would risk it, again, not being a success. And on the bottom line here, guys, despite all of this stuff we're hearing about Warner Brothers Discovery being in debt, and they very much so are. They're making deals here, there, trying to sell this, that, and the other to try and get some money. They're still going to kind of do the equivalent thing of taking out a loan and trying to give it everything they can to make it such a success, and hopefully then you get a lot of returns. Investing, albeit through a loan and quite a bit of debt, but hopefully for a freaking golden pot at the end of the rainbow. Do you know what I mean? Very, 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 very convinced about that. But yes, if the first DCU movie and then the project after that and the project after that is complete and utter negative critical attention and audience feedback, then that's a whole different conversation. So from Sugar Gay Shine saying, what DC project do you think has the potential to change everyone's mind on how the current universe is going movie-wise? It has to be Superman Legacy. Again, without repeating myself so much from earlier, this question I feel can only be answered with one answer, and that is the first movie, the silver lining of that universe being a popular character. If Superman Legacy slaps, and again, some people might be hesitant to even accept watching this new Superman movie, but like, let's just say for all intents and purposes, it ticks almost every single box that you could want, hypothetically, that would set up and tee up, oh my god, like, this was amazing. The future universe could be amazing. What we saw of the DCU world building in Superman Legacy looks amazing. They already backdoor piloted these awesome authority characters that maybe nobody cared about before, similar to, not nobody, but again, everyone likes to bring up the Guardians of the Galaxy movie. Who was that? Like, going into it, people are like, oh, I don't care about that. But then the movie came out and they're like, oh, damn. Do you know what I mean? It would set up, as you say, it could change people's mind on how the current universe is going movie-wise forward in the DCU. So this can only be answered with the very movie that they've strategically set up first, and that is Superman Legacy. It has to be the first movie in the DCU that would set up good impressions for fans to think, oh, I'm actually really excited for the future now, if you weren't already. So up next from Carl Marshall 4482, curious with how The Flash is doing. Do you think they keep Andy to do The Brave and the Bold? Yeah, like, no matter what with regards to how the Flash movie does, or has done, and will do, I mean, we pretty much know the project. It's not gonna have opening weekend ideal numbers weeks into its box office release. I've had conversations with some people who think that, but I, with all due respect to them, I do not know where they're getting that level of optimism from. But believe it or not, that doesn't impact Andy, in my opinion. Andy, let me put it this way. I had a conversation with someone in the comments as well with regards to a director versus a writer, right? So this is the thing. Andy Muschietti didn't direct and write The Flash. He just directed it. There was a writer who wrote the whole script. Now, this is up for debate, and I'd actually welcome it in the comments down below. The thing is, when you're like hired to be a director of a major film like this, like a major film as a director, you normally do have to, tick the boxes of the scripts. You can't really mess around with the script so much. I mean, maybe you can a little bit, but for example, if you were directing a movie of a script that you hadn't written and it was more on the indie level, then there would be a lot more to and fro with that script, with what the director can maybe change on the day and, have a bit of change in flux there. But when it's like a major movie picture like this, The Flash, and somebody else wrote it and you're directing it, the studio would really want it to be followed to the T, or if you did want some kind of change, then it would actually cause quite a bit of fuss. And you can maybe make that change, it's just you might have to kind of bring that to certain people to get that sign off. So it does take quite a bit of effort. Now, don't get me wrong, a director has quite a bit of freedom. They do maybe a different approach. Hey, maybe do it like this, maybe do it like that. But I think a lot of people think whether you didn't like the script or the story or the writing of the Flash movie, that's all Andy's fault. No, he directed the movie. Maybe you have some stylistic and director issues there with maybe what he did. But I think your bigger issue is with the writing of the movie, or maybe the visual effects. And this may sound like I'm trying to overly defend Muschietti here, but I'm really not. Like, it's such an intricate thing, especially when I've tried to understand the filmmaking process myself, so I can, when I'm talking about it, feel like with some level of confidence that I know what I'm talking about. Even with VFX, you might come back to me and be like, well, Boba, the director will look at the VFX there kind of thing, and it's all the director's fault. No, not necessarily. Recently, even on Twitter, there's been visual effects artists who worked on the Flash movie, and it's not the director who decides, oh, I want this to look bad, I'm not going to give the VFX studio enough time to work on these shots. No, it's the studio itself who are like, okay, I need this amount of shots done for the Flash movie, and you have this amount of time to do it. We're going to pay you this, and you need to get the work done. And this isn't like any surprise. Like, this shouldn't be no surprise to you with regards to all the stories we've heard about VFX artists in the film industry. Like, whether that's Across the Spider-Verse, whether that's other movies, this should come at no surprise. So they normally are like working overtime, working weekends, just trying to make a deadline. And even by that point, it won't be as good as it should be versus movies that spend a lot more time or give these VFX artists a lot longer time to perfect those shots. So all I'm trying to say there is like, do you really think Andy Muschietti with his sword or his axe was like, this is what I decree for the visual effects. If it could look better, I don't care. This is the way. No, like he might have the vision, the concept of it. And do you see what I mean? But he's not the dictator of what really goes down there. There's all kinds of other bells and whistles that are floating around in this twister, at the same time. I think, unfortunately, what happens is all the blame, like to a general audience member, goes on the director. Fair enough if maybe the director wrote the film and directed the film. Then there'd be a lot more we could talk about there, but Andy didn't. And please don't misconstrue what I'm saying here. Like, don't get me wrong, Andy does still, as a director, even with a film of this level, have, a bit of ebb and flow there with creativity, a lot going into the planning, this and the other, but I just don't think the way The Flash has performed should be all put down on to Andy Muschietti. So as a result, I don't think that compromises the comments James Gunn has made about him at all. I think he's still very happy with the choice of Andy working in the DCU like we heard ages ago. But I would love to know your thoughts on that personally. What you think of Andy Muschietti here? What you thought of my thoughts there? How Christina Hodgson actually wrote the Flash movie. She wrote Birds of Prey before. Apparently she wrote the Batgirl movie. Fast and Furious 11. What you think of that? But ladies and gentlemen, I think I'm going to end this rambly video there. I had a great time getting into several different topics of the current state of DC, Warner Brothers Discovery, and going into the DCU. So let me know your thoughts on everything we discussed down in the comments below. I read every single one. I reply to some of them. We've got a lot to talk about, so definitely leave one. I'd really appreciate it if you hit like on the video as well. Maybe consider subscribing if you want more reviews, discussion series videos, breakdowns like this. Let me know if you want to see another one of these as well. But until next time, guys, just thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you people of the DC Universe in the next video. Goodbye.